بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. حاضرین محفل السلام علیکم. آپ کو ولادت سبط اکبر جانشین مولا کائنات امام حسن مشتبہ کی ولادت آپ سارے عزاداروں کو مبارک ہو. یہ اس شہزادے کا ظہور ہے جو انا آتینا کل کوثر کی دلیل بن کے آیا ہے. کچھ اشعار امام حسن کے شعر میں پیش کرتا ہوں، ملاحظہ فرمائیں. خلم شبر کا جو تیخ علی میں ڈھل گیا ہوتا، مدینے کا وہ نقش کرب بلا ہوتا. مصرع پھر سے پڑھتا ہوں. خلم شبر کا جو تیخ علی میں ڈھل گیا ہوتا، مدینے کا وہ نقش کرب بلا ہوتا. گلا کٹانا بھائی کا کبھی بھائی کے ہاتھوں سے مسلمان نے سبق جو سلو شبر سے لیا ہوتا. خود اپنے خون کی دریا میں ہوتی خرق فوج شام، اگر قاسم کے خط میں یہ حسن نے لکھ دیا ہوتا. خد غازی اگر کھینچا گیا نہ ہوتا، خد غازی اگر میدان میں نہ کھینچا گیا ہوتا، کدھر ہے حق کدھر ہے باطل یہ کیسے فیصلہ ہوتا. مصرع پھر سے پڑھتا ہوں. خد غازی اگر میدان میں نہ کھینچا گیا ہوتا، کدھر ہے حق کدھر ہے باطل یہ کیسے فیصلہ ہوتا. اگر شام غریباں میں نہ ہوتی حضرت زینب، چراغ دین حق جلنے سے پہلے ہی بجھ گیا ہوتا. بہت قیمتی مصرع ہے. مصرع پھر سے پڑھتا ہوں، توجہات کا طالب ہو. اگر شام غریباں میں نہ ہوتی حضرت زینب، چراغ دین حق جلنے سے پہلے ہی بجھ گیا ہوتا. زباں بھی بند ہوتی دھڑکنیں بھی رک گئی ہوتی، فقیر شام کا عباس گر سامنا ہوتا. زباں بھی بند ہوتی دھڑکنیں بھی رک گئی ہوتی، فقیر شام کے عباس سے اگر سامنا ہوتا. ایک ربائی مولا کی شان پیش کرتا ہوں، ملاحظہ فرمائیں. قلم کے نوک سے ہی کٹ گئی جب کفر کی گردن، اگر شبر کہیں شبیر بن جاتے تو کیا ہوتا. قلم کی نوک سے ہی کٹ گئی جب کفر کی گردن، اگر شبر کہیں شبیر بن جاتے تو کیا ہوتا. نوک قلم کا وار جو تلوار ہو گیا، دشمن بھی صلح کرنے کو تیار ہو گیا. الفاظ کی رسن میں حسن نے جکڑ لیا، دشمن علی کا آج گرفتار ہو گیا. مصرع پھر سے پڑھتا ہوں، ملاحظہ فرمائیں. نوک قلم کا وار جو تلوار ہو گیا، دشمن بھی صلح کرنے کو تیار ہو گیا. الفاظ کی رسن میں حسن نے جکڑ لیا، دشمن علی کا آج گرفتار ہو گیا. خط کھینچ کر یہ فوج سے بولا علی کا شیر، اس پار بھیج دوں گا جو اس پار ہو گیا. شکریہ. التماس دعا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. For the hastening and the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. I'll start tonight's program, inshallah, with a big congratulations on the birth of our beloved second Imam, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that on a day like this, He showers us with His mercy and with His blessings. I hope everyone is doing well. And inshallah, today's program will be a little bit more informal and a little bit more in a festive spirit, rather, to inshallah have us actually enjoy this moment of Eid, this special birth of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, who we're going to talk about more about today, inshallah. But hopefully this will give us more of a festive atmosphere to truly experience this gesture and this day of happiness for the Ahlul Bayt. So before I get started with the talk that we will have today, I wanted to shed light on two important points. First of all, if you take a look at the schedule, there is going to be a Q&A after my talk. So if you have seen the link in the WhatsApp group, you can send in questions. The questions can be about anything, about the month of Ramadan or these topics that we were covering regarding Prophet Ibrahim during these nights maybe, or any other question that we might have. You can either use the link in the WhatsApp group, or if you're watching over YouTube, you can just post the questions directly in the YouTube chat. And inshallah, as I get to the end of the talk, we'll go through those questions. We already have some questions that have come in from before, but wanted to mention it so that inshallah, by the time we get to that point, everyone has enough time to send in their questions. That's number one. Number two is the raffle that we are going to have. I was told in the description, yes, in the YouTube, where you're watching this on YouTube, in the description, you will find a link to the community raffle. So, based on what I was told, entering into the raffle does not cost anything. So if you like to win a prize, there's really no reason not to enter into the raffle. If you look at the description of this link, the description right below where you're watching the live stream, there's a description. If you click on that description, you will find it. I believe it's also in the live chat as well. If we can put the link for the raffle into the live chat, inshallah, there will be prizes for those who are part of the raffle. And like I mentioned, the raffle, there is no charge with regards to it. So there really should be no reason why you don't sign up. You could win, and inshallah, you'll benefit from the prizes that are there. Okay. Inshallah, let's delve into the topic for tonight. Excuse me. And just wanted to shed some light on some of the lessons that we can learn from Imam Al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, and essentially his birth and then his characteristics that made him so special. Before I delve into this, it's important to understand and remember that within the Shia school of thought, there are those characters that we highly revere that may not be as well known in other schools of thought. Yes? Our Imams, for example, maybe the 7th Imam or other Imams of ours, maybe not as well known in other schools of thought. When it comes to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, that is not the case. When it comes to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, because he was one of the Sahaba of the Prophet, and he spent time with the Prophet, though he was a grandchild of the Prophet, but he spent time with the Prophet, he is highly revered and highly regarded in all schools of thought within Islam. And also because he is part of Ahlul Kisa. He is also highly regarded. Also because he was there on the day of Mubahala. Also highly regarded. And the role that he played when he was alive, we know how the story of Imam Al-Hasan unfolded, of how he was in charge and then he had to sign this peace treaty. Of course, we look at it as a tragic incident, but in other schools of thought, they still highly regard Imam Al-Hasan because they say he was one who, instead of leading things to bloodshed, he was willing to take on this peace treaty and he was willing to essentially get along with those other powerful individuals who lived at that time. We don't look at it that way, of course. We look at this moment as a tragic moment in history, that Imam al-Hasan was forced to sign the peace treaty. Nonetheless, he is an individual that is highly regarded in all schools of thought within Islam. So let's begin from the birth of Imam al-Hasan. When he was born, we hear and we read in the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ was on a trip and that he was not present in the city of Medina. When the Prophet returned back to the city of Medina, he was told and he was given the news that Imam al-Hasan was born. Of course, the Prophet, he shouldn't have been too surprised by the news of this birth. He of course knew that Hassan was going to come. He of course knew who Hussain was and how Imam al-Hussain was going to come. Of course, our Prophet and Ali ibn Abi Talib and Lady Fatima al-Zahra, they knew that this unit of these 5 individuals that are so critical and so highly regarded and revered, that their numbers would be complete at one point. Therefore, the birth of Imam al-Hasan couldn't have been a surprise for the Prophet. Nonetheless, they say the Prophet returned back from his trip and he entered into Medina. When he came back to Medina, Imam Ali alayhi salam and Lady Fatima gave him the news and the word that this child has been born. And when the child was born, they say the Prophet entered into the house to come and visit the child. And when he came to visit the child, he asked, he said, "What have you named this child?" And Ali ibn Abi Talib, with those manners that he had and with the adab that he had, he responded to the Prophet. He said, "Ya Rasulullah, when it comes to naming my children, me and Fatima, we never go ahead of you. We always wait to see what is the name that you want to put on this child." Yes? And then Imam al-Hussein, or rather the Prophet said, "You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because I also do not go ahead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to naming this child. I am not the one to go ahead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." And therefore Jibreel descended and came to the Prophet. He said, "Ya Rasulullah, you are to name this child of yours the same name of the son of Harun." Yes, Harun, the brother of Musa alayhi salam. You are to name him the same name of the son of Harun alayhi salam. And what is that name? That name is Shubbar. You are to name him Shubbar. And the Prophet salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi responded to Jibreel. He said, "Our language is the Arabic language. What is this name in the Arabic language?" To which Jibreel responded that name would be the name Hassan. This is how the name Al-Hasan came out to be, and also the name of Hussain as well. The narrations mention something similar to this as it relates to Imam al-Hussain. Shubbar and Shubair, Hassan and Hussain is what you find for the 2 names of Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussain. This was the birth of Imam al-Hasan, but we know that Imam al-Hasan, of course, he grew to become a character that was not only revered simply because he was the grandson of the Prophet, but also because of his characteristics and the type of attributes that he acquired as he grew up. And amongst these characteristics, amongst these attributes that shine brighter than any of the other attributes of Imam al-Hasan, in particular, is the generosity that Imam al-Hasan had. And tonight, inshallah, we'll be focusing a little bit more on this attribute of the Imam, because it's so beautiful when you read the history and the stories that is mentioned and narrated about Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, the generosity that he used to show, and the different ways that he used to show this generosity, and how he would still, even though he was very generous, how he would still give more credit to others' generosity over his own. So it was generosity, but humility mixed in with that generosity. Because there are many who are very generous. You've come across people who give from their wealth, yes? But these same people, because they're not humble, they ruin their generosity. The Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, la tubtilu sadaqatikum bil manni wal adha. Is one of the first verses that we delved into in this month of Ramadan. O you who believe, when you do good, in particular the Quran is mentioning sadaqat, when you are generous and you give, maybe from your wealth, maybe from your time, whatever the case might be, do not ruin your good deeds bil manni wal adha. Do not ruin your good deeds by then becoming arrogant and reminding this person of his good deeds, or rather your generosity towards him, yes? Or do not bother this person to ruin your good deed later. What Imam Al-Hasan did was he had generosity, but alongside this generosity came this humility. And when you have both of these, you have the best combination ever, yes? When you have a person who's willing to give from his wealth, from his time, from his energy, from his credibility even, and at the same time he is humble enough to not assume that what he is giving is too big and it's too great, for him to not consider his good deed as too big of a good deed. This is the best combination that you can come across. This is exactly what we find in life of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. His generosity, as we'll go through the stories, it exceeded the expectations of people. And this generosity extended beyond simply being generous towards human beings. It also went towards being generous towards other creatures that Imam al-Hasan used to come across, which was another practice of the Ahlul Bayt. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And he was generous even at times where he was busy in taking care of other acts of worship. You find Imam al-Hasan would give precedence to generosity over other acts of worship. Meaning that, for example, there were times where he was carrying out or performing a particular act of worship. You find that he would leave this mustahab act of worship, not the wajib one, of course, the mustahab act of worship. Why? Because he wanted to be generous to someone, showing that this generosity carried even more weight and value in his eyes compared to some of the other acts of worship that you and I might very highly regard. Yes, we might speak of those acts of worship in the most, in the highest of ways. Imam al-Hasan would leave that act of worship to be generous towards a brother or a sister of his. Okay, let's delve into these stories. Some of them are shorter, some of them are smaller, but they all revolve around the generosity of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. I'll begin from this, which is one of my favorite ones. They say Imam al-Hasan one day, he was eating food. And back in the day, it wasn't this case where you had restaurants and people would come sit on tables. No, you would sit pretty much anywhere. Especially if you were a humble individual, you might have been sitting, for example, you might be leaning on the wall to your house, for example, in the alley. Maybe you're eating some food there, or you're snacking on something. So people used to sit all places and eat. They say Imam al-Hasan was sitting outside, maybe in the alleys of Medina, and he was having some food. And while he was eating, some of his companions were there with him. They say that from far away, a dog approached Imam al-Hasan, in the sense that there was a dog who was close to them. And they were, of course, eating, and it wasn't anything lavish that they were eating. The hadith says that maybe, based on what I remember, that maybe it was some loaves of bread that they were consuming, yes? Nonetheless, Imam Hassan saw this dog who obviously was hungry and also wanted to eat from this, this food. And he says that, the narration says that when the companions saw this dog, they turned to Imam al-Hasan. They said, Ya ibn Rasulullah, we're going to get rid of this dog. This dog is bothering us. He's annoying us. And this dog is dirty and it's najis. And we're going to get rid of it. So maybe, of course, the hadith doesn't mention the details here, but maybe they started to yell at the dog or throw maybe stones or rocks at the dog, whatever the case may be. And this is where Imam al-Hasan stopped them. Yes, this is the generosity of Imam al-Hasan, the beauty in his character. He stopped them. He said, listen, this dog who's standing here is hungry. He wants some food, maybe from this bread, maybe from the meat that we're consuming. This dog needs some food. And I'm not okay, I'm not happy with you forcing this dog to leave. I would feel ashamed and embarrassed for me to eat while another living being is watching me and this living being is hungry. If there's another living being around me, be that a human being, of course, but even an animal, then I am to be merciful and I am to give of my own food. And Imam Al-Hasan used to take from his own food and give to this dog. And there's another point that we understand from this beautiful story, and that is this, that this animal was not your typical animal. It wasn't just like a bird, for example. It wasn't some dove, for example, that looked more presentable or beautiful. No, this was a dog. This was a dog that was coming, going, it didn't necessarily have anyone taking care of it. And naturally, a dog, we know that in the religion of Islam, across schools of thought, a dog is najis. Yes? But this didn't stop the Imam from giving from his own food. Because unfortunately, I hear, and I get questions about this quite often actually, that our perspective when it comes to dogs, when it comes to other animals that are najis like pigs, what is our perspective in this regard? Are these animals evil? Are these animals things that you should be embarrassed to have around? Or this was never the perspective of the Ahlul Bayt. Yes, they are najis. That means that you have to have certain precautions. You have to keep some distance. Naturally, having this dog in a place where it's going to be wet and then it's going to have, it's going to make your life najis. Of course, yes. That's why purchasing things that are fundamentally najis in Islam, there is issues there, unless for certain exceptions. But mistreating an animal, making sure that this animal, God forbid, goes hungry this was never part of the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. If the animal is najis, that's its own ruling. This animal is never evil. That's why Imam Al-Hasan shows so much importance. He says, if this dog is watching me, I'm going to give from my own food because I'm ashamed to eat while another living being is watching me while it is hungry. So this is a lesson on both sides. And this is what happens when a human being grows from a spiritual perspective. He starts to become kind, not only to other human beings, even to pets, even to animals, even to insects that he might find, anything and everything really. He becomes kind to all of the different individuals that he comes across, right? I want to share this story slightly on a different note, but it goes back to this kindness that someone shows to the people that he comes across. And really manifests this in the most beautiful of ways. A scholar who's older now himself, but at the time that he witnessed this incident happening, he was younger. He was one of the scholars in the city of Qom. He says, I was residing in Qom and I was going through my studies at that time. He says, as I was walking in the city of Qom, I saw Allama Tabatabai. Yes, this great author, this great mufassir, this scholar who is just so unknown, even to the Muslim world today. He says that I saw Allama Tabatabai, and Allama Tabatabai, while he was alive, was in fact very much unknown. And it wasn't the case that people knew him. I mean, even today people don't know him. Nonetheless, he says Allama Tabatabai was walking in the streets, and because, Qom was a very small city, and even today if you go to Qom, it's still a very small city compared to some of the bigger cities. You would, around the haram, around the shrine of Lady Fatima, you would find kids coming, going, running around, playing around. He says as Allama Tabatabai was passing by the shrine, one of the kids who was riding his bike came and essentially, bumped into Allama Tabatabai, this older man, and he fell on the ground and he scraped his hands and his clothing was all dirty. And then he says, I was witnessing and observing this from far. And he says, as I watched, I wanted to see what Allama Tabatabai would do in this moment. He says he got up and there was no sign of frustration or anger on his face. He got up, he picked up his aba, and then the first thing that he did is he went and he checked on the child. And he said, my son, are you okay? Your bike hit the ground and you fell on the ground. And this child was a child, he didn't even know who this is. And he said, yes, I'm fine. Got on the bike, and rode off, so to speak. And he says, I was watching how Allama Tabatabai, even though he was the one that hit the ground and he was old, he's of elder age at this point, he got up, he wore his aba, and he walked on. The kindness that someone has in their heart when they grow from a spiritual perspective is one of the ways you can tell if someone is growing from a spiritual perspective. It's one of the ways. And it all starts, brothers and sisters, from taking care of our wajib and haram. And part of that wajib and haram is being kind and having good akhlaq with our relatives and our family members. That's a topic for another time. I don't want to branch off into that, so I'll leave that. But you find here Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, his kindness. On another occasion, you find Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, and this is where his generosity now extends beyond other acts of worship. meaning that he gives precedence to these acts of worship, to his generosity, over other acts of worship that he's already doing. The author of Tarikh Dimashq, this is a Sunni author by the name of Ibn Asakir. He narrates about Imam Al-Hasan, that Imam Al-Hasan was doing tawaf around the Kaaba. And we know that Imam Al-Hasan made multiple trips to Hajj, yes? And it's interesting, in history you read that he would never ride the animal when he was on Hajj, but instead, when there were those who had fallen behind their caravan, Imam Al-Hasan would take his animal, he would have them ride on that horse or on that camel. Yes? He would walk, but he would allow others for them to ride on his camel. Nonetheless, on one of these times where he is doing tawaf around the Kaaba, a brother of his comes and says, Yabna Rasulullah, I have a favor I need you to do for me. And the narration mentions that Imam Al-Hasan, in the middle of his tawaf, he's left. And there was someone there who was jealous of the person who was asking for help. Yes? So he turned to Imam Al-Hasan. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, really? You're going to leave tawaf? You're going to leave, going around the Kaaba because this person asked you for help? To which Imam Al-Hasan responded, he said, the Prophet has told us that the one who responds to the need of another believer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will count for him not one tawaf or two tawafs. He will count for him one umrah and one hajj. What do I have to lose? I'm doing this mustahab tawaf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will count for me a full hajj and a full umrah. This is the generosity that you find in the seerah of Imam Al-Hasan. Then you move on. This is that story I wanted to mention, where his generosity and his humility now are coming together. So beautiful of a combination. They say Imam Al-Hasan was riding through the city of Medina one day, and he saw people sitting by the street, and they were eating, a group of poor individuals, and they were having, dried up bread. This was their food. When they saw Imam Al-Hasan, who, of course, you have to remember, Imam Al-Hasan, at least for a portion of the Muslim Ummah, he was the Khalifa. Yes, at least before the peace treaty was signed, he was in charge of a big portion of the Muslim Ummah. So at least in terms of his worldly, power and wealth, he was given a lot of authority. Of course, we know the issues that were there with Muawiyah and all of that history. When they saw Imam Al-Hasan, almost as if they wanted to test him, they said, Yabna Rasulullah, why don't you come and sit with us and eat with us? Yes? And Imam Al-Hasan responded to them. He said, Inna Allah la yuhibbul mutakabbirin. He said, Allah never likes those who are, arrogant. So he got off of his horse and he came and he sat by these poor individuals and he had food with them. When he was done having the food with them, then before he got back on his horse, he turned to them. He said, listen, I accepted your invitation. Now it's time for you to accept my invitation. Now it's time for you to come to my house. So they came later to the house of Imam Hassan. And Imam Al-Hasan prepared a meal for them. And they ate at his house. And then they left. And Imam Al-Hasan turned to those who were there. He said, you know what? What they did for me was greater than what I did for them. They said, Yabna Rasulullah, you, this authority, people respect you so much. You sat with them, you ate them, you invited them to your house. What do you mean? He said, because they gave of everything that they had. But I gave and I still have extra. What they did for me is even better than what I did for them. This is that beautiful combination of generosity, doing good to others, but at the same time being humble about it. Yes? Not going and telling this person and reminding this person, yes, you remember I did this for you, remember I did that for you. This is that humility that Imam Hassan had. And this combination of generosity and humility is something that our Imams have repeatedly touched on and emphasized on. That when you sit with the poor, understand that essentially what you get out of that interaction is greater and bigger than what they get out of that interaction. As odd as that might seem, when you sit with a person who is in need and you help them out, you are the one who is blessed more than they are. Or rather, you are the one who benefits more. What they have done for you is greater. This is what Imam As-Sadiq told a companion of his. His name was Hussain ibn Nu'aym. He said, Hussain, let me ask you a question. Where you live, are you close with your brothers and sisters? Yes? Do you keep a close circle? You visit one another? He said, yes. Ya Imam al-Sadiq, we do. He said, well, let me ask you, do you help the poor and do you benefit the poor from amongst you? You know, you have your friends, but the poor and the vulnerable, do you help them? He said, yes, Ya ibn Rasulullah. He said, do you invite them to your house to come and eat maybe from a meal that you've prepared? He said, yes. He said, okay. He said, so they come and they eat and they leave. He said, yes. He said, Hussein, did you know that what they bring to your house is greater than what you give them? The favor that they do upon you is greater than the favor you're doing upon them. And this is the part where the companion of Imam Sadiq, he was too surprised at this point. He said, Ya ibn Rasulullah, ju'iltu fidak. How is that possible though? These are individuals who are poor. They have nothing to eat. I'm the one who's providing them with food. I mean, I don't understand. How is it that I give them food, right? And I give them shelter, and yet what they do for me is greater than what I do for them? He said, yes. He said, how is that? He said, listen, Hussein, when these poor individuals come to your house and they leave, what you bring to them and what you give to them is some food. Yes? Okay, great. But what do they bring to your house when they come? He said, when they come to your house, they bring the maghfirah and the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to your house. And when they leave your house, they take your sins away with them. What they do for you is greater than what you do for them. And if you look at it in this way, then this is when a person will be extra generous, because he knows that when he is generous, he's not losing anything. He's the one who's gaining the most. They asked, inshallah, with this I'll be wrapping up. They asked Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, about stinginess. So what does it mean when someone is stingy? Take a look at how Imam al-Hasan defines stinginess. He says it's all about the mindset. It's all about the way you look at this. He said stinginess is when a man or a woman thinks that when he gives in the path of Allah, he's losing his wealth. He said if a person looks at his wealth and giving in the path of Allah in this way, he's stingy. What does that mean? It means that if you look at it in this way, of course you're going to hold back. Of course, the moment you feel like when you're giving, you're losing your wealth, your wealth is being decreased, of course you're going to hold back. Of course you're not going to give from it. Imam Hassan said, stinginess is when someone thinks that when they give in the path of Allah, their wealth is decreasing and they are losing from their wealth. This is the type of mindset, the type of mentality that allowed Imam al-Hasan on multiple occasions to give portions of his life away altogether, and at other times to give his whole life away altogether. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we can learn from the seerah of Imam al-Hasan. For some of us, brothers and sisters, if we were to take even small portions of our livelihood and give it to those who are in need, those who are going through difficult times. We have, of course, we do this iftar assistance every year as part of CFK's programs. If we can help there, so many people around the world. We hear, for example, what's happening in India these days, right? The surge that's happening. Other parts of the world, I mean, there's more than we can count. If we were to take a little bit of our livelihood, yes, and hold back just a little bit on some of the extra things that we don't need to purchase, and give to those who are in need, and give to those who could use this in a multitude of ways. We have to understand that our wealth will never be decreased in this manner. This is the lesson and the heritage of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. With that, inshallah, I'll bring tonight's talk to an end. I just want to go through the questions, inshallah, and see if we have any questions. Just going to check the live chat, and then after that, we will go through the raffle as well. Okay, I can see the questions here. Okay, so first question is this. Salam, is it permissible to withdraw from society for the sake of self-improvement? Wonderful question. Wa alaikum assalam. The answer to this is that there is no better example than the example of the Ahlul Bayt. The example of Ahlul Bayt was that they did not withdraw fundamentally from society. We just read these stories. Imam Al-Hasan was sitting with his companions. He used to sit with the poor. He used to see people every single day. So withdrawing from society fundamentally, no, that is not the way to go. Withdrawing from certain portions of society, certain practices within society, certain circles within society, absolutely. Especially for us who live in this part of the world, we have to be very careful as families. Who do we spend time with? Who are our children spending time with? Yes? Who are we acquainted with? Do we just attend any gathering, or are we selective about where we go and we spend time? This is very important. There are many gatherings that might be haram for us to attend. There are many families who don't have the same values as you do. There are many individuals who don't have the same values as you do. So it's not a black and white. Either you become one with society or you withdraw from society completely. No, you're part of society, but you are mindful about who you are spending time with. If it's a haram gathering, then that's something that I shouldn't be attending. At least if it's something that is, something. There are certain situations where our maraja allow us to attend for a little bit. Maybe if it's a wedding that's really, really important for me to attend, maybe I can attend for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then leave, for example. So there are details there, of course. But fundamentally, it's neither full withdrawal, nor is it full, meshing with society as well. There's a balance that we have to take in between. How old was Imam Hassan when Bibi Fatima passed away? That's a very good question. I don't remember the numbers right now, to be honest. Imam Al-Hasan, when Lady Fatima passed away. So we know that Imam Al-Hasan he spent 7 years of his life with the Prophet. So, and the Prophet passed away, and Lady Fatima Zahra passed away soon after that. So, yeah, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. The numbers don't come to my mind right now. So forgive me for that. If one breaks a qada fast on purpose, would they have to give kafara for it? Yes, absolutely. It is haram to do so if they broke their fast on purpose without a valid reason, of course, right? Then yes, they would have to give kafara. The kafara is feeding 60 different individuals, not different individuals, poor individuals. And so there are certain conditions there. What I would suggest is that you would take this money, the representative of Ayatul Sistani Imam organization, they take this money and they feed the poor. It's easier to just do it that way because you don't have to worry about finding those individuals who have all of the qualifications as individuals who have to be fed, basically. Because there are certain conditions that come with it. But it would be essentially, last time I checked, if you wanted to feed someone here, it would be a couple $100 at least per day. I think we'll have to go back and see what the numbers would be if you wanted to do it somewhere else. How do we defend against those who say we pray towards alams and Ahlul Bayt instead of Allah? Well, it's just a matter of explaining things to them. And of course, this is something that we have to pay attention to in general, that the place of Quran and the place of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and these things, we need to be talking more about these things as well. That's something that we should generally be doing. But in terms of the fundamental question, it's just a matter of explaining that if, for example, this alam is there, this is just to show respect to the Ahlul Bayt. This is just to remind the Ahlul Bayt, right? Or remind us of the Ahlul Bayt. These are icons that remind us of the message of the Ahlul Bayt. It's not more than that. It's not less than that either. Just in the fact that it reminds you of the message of Imam al-Hussain, it holds value. Maqam Ibrahim that you find in Mecca, for example, the place where the Prophet Ibrahim's footsteps have sunk into, which we will talk about later on in the series, this is an icon. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala values this because it reminds you of the message of Ibrahim. Similarly, anything that reminds you of the message of the Ahlul Bayt, that is something that we respect. Do we worship it or anything like that? No, that's obviously a misunderstanding. So it just takes some explanation. Which prophet's story has the most verses in the Holy Quran? That's a tough question. What I can say is which prophet is mentioned the most in the Quran. And that is Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam is the number one most frequently mentioned prophet in the Quran. And of course, his story, for those who remember, we covered his story 2 years ago, I believe, is scattered amongst different verses. After that is Prophet Ibrahim. Prophet Ibrahim's name is mentioned 69 times in the verses of the Quran. So that's in terms of the number of times their names are mentioned. How many verses are allocated to each of them? I wouldn't know exactly the number of verses, but those are the prophets that are mentioned the most common. Was Prophet Ibrahim the youngest prophet to start preaching Islam? Well, the answer is no. The youngest prophet to have been preaching things, as far as I remember, is Isa alayhi salam, right? Of course, when we say Islam, we mean it in the general sense, right? Isa alayhi salam be chosen as a prophet at what age? At the age where he was in the cradle. And it wasn't that he just spoke in the cradle, because the Quran says, قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ آتَانِيَ الْكِتَابِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me the knowledge of the book. That means Isa alayhi salam was a prophet from a very, very young age. Did he start preaching immediately? There is dispute about this. At what age did he actually start preaching to people? But the Quran seems to tell us that he became a prophet at a very, very young age. Yahya alayhi salam, also the Quran says, وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْحُكْمَ الصَّبِيَّةِ. We gave him the knowledge and wisdom of prophethood at a young age while he was a child, but it seems as though Isa alayhi salam became a prophet at even a younger age. How do we respond to not being able to pray for the deceased? I'm not sure what exactly is meant by this question, because we are able to pray for the deceased. If what you mean is those who are mushrik and they left this world, as disbelievers, we mentioned this in the talk that we were having about Prophet Ibrahim, and we mentioned the answer to this is because praying for a person who leaves this world in a state of disbelief has no benefit for him. There's no benefit for him. So praying for him is meaningless. That's why it is not allowed in Islam. For other individuals who are deceased, of course, you can pray and you should pray. Is Prophet Ibrahim going to come back with the Imam like Prophet Isa? Good question. We don't know exactly, but there's a good chance that will happen, because what hadith tells us is that when the Imam returns, not only Prophet Isa returns with him, some of the greater prophets of Allah also return with him. And I don't remember Prophet Ibrahim being mentioned by name, but it does say that some of the greater prophets of Allah will return with him. So it's not just Prophet Isa alayhi salam. So there's a good chance that Ibrahim could return with the 12th Imam as well. What are some titles of Imam Hassan and what do they mean? Of course, the most famous is Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, and Mujtaba means the one who is chosen. He has other titles. For example, he's also given the title of Al-Tayyib, which means, the purified one, Az-Zaki, which essentially has a similar meaning, the pure one. These are some of the titles that Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba is given. Of course, he's also given the title of Sayyidai, one of the two masters of the youth of heaven, Sayyidai Shabab Ahl Jannah, which is narrated by Shia and Sunni. Yes, in other schools of thought, he is also known by these two. Yes. What are the recommended du'as to read during Ramadan? These du'as that we have at the end of prayer are wonderful. Ya Ali, Ya Adim is wonderful. Du'a Mujir, especially for the younger ones, is wonderful because it's simple to understand and it's very straightforward. Abu Hamza, of course, is also recommended, and Du'a al-Iftitah. But Du'a Mujir is one that I would highly recommend for especially those who have families with younger kids. And of course, Joshan Kabir. And if you can't recite all of Joshan Kabir, even a portion of it is fine. It's not the case that you have to recite all 100 verses. Even if you recite 10, 20, 30, 40, even that will be beneficial, inshallah. But those particular du'as that we have to be recited after a salat, the short ones, Ya Ali, Ya Adim, and the other one, those are definitely highly recommended to be recited. Okay. Moving on, can I do A'mal of Qadr on 6 days, or do I have to do only on 3 nights? No, I mean, if you're doubtful about the whole month and the beginning and all of that, then if you really have a doubt, you can do it on all 6 days. If someone doesn't have a doubt, then it doesn't really make sense for them to do that. But if someone has a doubt, sure, they can do that. That's no problem in that regard. What is the rules for fasting? I will mention this though. as a fundamental rule, for whatever, because I've been receiving questions of this in regards to this quite a bit. I will just mention this as a fundamental rule. If, now is the 15th of Ramadan, or midway at least through Ramadan, if you are still doubtful, did Ramadan begin, which day did it begin, and whatnot, you should automatically take the later day as the beginning of Ramadan. Okay? Which means today would be the 15th for you. This is the ruling of Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Khamenei. All of our scholars have said, if you are not sure if Ramadan has begun or not, you will act as if Sha'ban was 30 days. Okay? If you're sure Ramadan began earlier or whatever, okay, great, that's fine. Then you will act upon that. If at this point you are not sure, you still doubt, I spoke to this person, I spoke to that person, and I asked this person and that person, I'm still not sure about it, then that means Sha'ban is 30 days for you, and that, the nights of Qadr will begin, inshallah, from Saturday for you. That's just a general principle as with regards to setting aside all the moon sighting and everything, as it relates to someone who has doubt. If you have doubt, you will always assume that Sha'ban is 30 days. What is the rules for fasting while traveling? Well, the rules is essentially it's not permissible. You can't do that. It's only permissible if you are a frequent traveler. And being a frequent traveler has certain conditions. Essentially, it is that you plan to be traveling for at least 6 months, and in these 6 months, you have to be traveling at least 10 days out of each month. If you are doing this, then yes, according to Ayatollah Sistani, you will then be considered a frequent traveler. You can fast while you are traveling, or rather, you have to fast while you're traveling. Otherwise, you would have to break your fast, unless if you are leaving the city after Dhuhr. Then just that day, you can fast. Of course, the following days, because you're going to be traveling, then you won't be able to fast those days. Did Prophet Ibrahim become an Imam the same time as he became a prophet? Wonderful question. Part 13 of the series, the last night or the last lecture of the month of Ramadan. Tune in and we will delve deeply into that. That topic, I am looking forward to it for two reasons. First of all, it's a wonderful topic. It's a very deep topic. It is a Quranic topic. And number two, inshallah, it'll be the last lecture that I'll have to prepare for. So it will be a double wonderful topic. It will be a means of happiness from two different perspectives. Are there any du'as attributed to Imam Hassan? I'm sure there must be. Nothing comes to my mind right now, to be honest. Okay. All right, so just one more announcement that we have is with regards to the raffle. If you take a look at the chats, take a look at the chat in the YouTube channel. There is a link for the raffle that we will be doing very soon. Are we going to be doing the raffle? We're going to announce it later. Are we going to do it now? Okay, so we're going to do the raffle now. So these are your last chances if you haven't signed up for the raffle. And I'm also looking just to see if we have any more questions. I don't see any questions here in the chat section. So while I give you guys a couple moments in case there are any other questions to be sent in, I will say this just as an extra clarification, although the message went out, I think today or yesterday, I can't remember exactly. But with regards to the programs, inshallah, and the opening of the center, as you know, that inshallah from the beginning of the night of Qadr, the center will be open, but there are, of course, restrictions. First of all, everyone who is going to be attending has to be fully vaccinated, which based on what the medical team has mentioned, is that it has to be 2 weeks after your second dose, or 2 weeks after the one dose, if you took the one dose, okay? So that's number one. So you have to make sure that that's the case, and you have to pre-register through the link that was sent through WhatsApp. Please make sure that you pre-register. Otherwise, because of the safety of our brothers and sisters, we're going to have issues. If someone does not pre-register and then they show up, that's going to be creating problems. We want to, inshallah, make sure that if we're opening up the center after this long time, and I'm very excited for it, by the way, because we haven't had people here. I'm quite tired of talking to the camera here. So it's wonderful that we'll have everybody back. But please make sure you pre-register, number one. Number two, because you have to be fully vaccinated, naturally children under the age of 16 will not be allowed to attend in any of the programs. Okay, that's number two. Number three is the last Friday of Ramadan, Jum'atul Wada'. Inshallah, we will be restarting our Jummah prayers. So that there was a link sent out for that as well in the chat in terms of the information and whatnot. So that is also only for fully vaccinated individuals. And while we're here, inshallah, there will be distance and also there will be masking that will be necessary during the program. Okay, I think there was one question that... Yes, so someone said if they break a qada fast on purpose, this is great that this came up. I think I missed this one point. Yes, a qada fast, if you're making a qada fast, you can break it before dhuhr. There's no problem with regards to that. If you break the qada fast after dhuhr, then there is going to be that kafara that we mentioned. And I didn't pay attention to the question. I thought the question was just breaking a fast in general. If it's a qada fast, the kafara might be different. I'm having doubts right now. But are you allowed to break the fast after dhuhr? No. Before dhuhr, if it's a qada fast, not your month of Ramadan. If it's a qada fast, before dhuhr, yes, you have permission to break the fast. It's not a sin. There's no kafara in that regard. Once you hit dhuhr, then you have to fast the rest of that day for your qada fast. So hopefully I answered that question. Okay, so the brothers have run the raffle, and I have the names of the winners of the raffle. I don't see my name in there, so I think there was tiny bit of a mistake. But anyways, that's cool. It's okay. It's the birth of Imam Hassan. I'm gonna have good akhlaq, even though I didn't win. I'll still have good akhlaq. So, Sister Batul Hussain, Brother Hasnain Mamdani, Dr. Muhammad Divjani, Sister Uruj Murtaza, and Brother Shuja Bilgrami were the winners of today's raffle. Inshallah, with that, congratulations to all of them. With that, inshallah, we'll bring tonight's talk to an end. Of course, I want to take a moment for us to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the dear brothers and sisters who were kind enough to sponsor tonight's program. And if I can just pull up the sponsorship list. Yes. So the sponsors of tonight's program, Brother Zahid, Jafary, and family, in loving memory of all Marhumeen. The Rizvi family, in loving memory of our Marhumeens. Brother Ajaz, Kamil Khan, and family, in loving memory of all of our Marhumeen. Brother Asad and Sister Narjis, Fatima, and family, in loving memory of Shariff, Zahed, and Jasani Marhumeen. Brother Asif and Sister Zeenat, Patel, and family, in loving memory of all Marhumeen. Brother Rayaz and Sister Azra Jagani and Sister Naseem Jagani and family, in loving memory of Jagani family and RajabAli Hussain. And Sayyid Saeed Al-Hasan Rizvi, in loving memory of all Marhumeen. With a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. Ihdina as-sirat wal-mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء يا سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا قمر بني هاشم يا أبو الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا أم المصائب يا زينب بنت أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء يا علي بن موسى رضا راضي بالقدر والقضاء. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. يا سيدي أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.